Hello everyone, I am Lisa Fulford, your creative coach, and I'm here for a Technique Tuesday. And I have a technique to remind everybody to get the most out of your embossing folders. And so I'm not necessarily going to do the technique, I'm just going to show some examples of the different ways that you can use your embossing folders, and I will explain how I did each one of those, but I'm not going to actually do those. And so I hope that it'll be a short video, but maybe I can refresh your, memory on there's other techniques that you can do with your embossing folders. So give me one moment and we will be at my countertop. All right, so there it is. I'm going to bring in my embossing folder. This is the embossing folder that I did my cards with, and I thought if I use the same embossing folder for each one of the cards, it'll make it a little bit more understanding on what all you can do with your embossing folders. If I were moving around trying different embossing folders and things, then it maybe would have been a little bit more confusing. So you could use these techniques with any embossing folders, but I happen to choose this one here as the Distress Tile 3D embossing folder. And so as a reminder, whenever you do a sandwich of the embossing folder, you would do cardstock here. You would do your embossing folder, and there's a line here, so that means you can line things up. So right here is where this says Stampin' Up. You could put your cardstock in here, kind of like that. Line it up with that black line. And you always put your seam in first, and your sandwich is number 1 embossing folder with paper in it, and then the number 4 plate. So here's the 4. And if you have any questions about what kind of a sandwich that you use to do your embossing or your die cutting, you look at your number 1 plate, because it says place die cutting edge down. Whenever you're going to do die cuts, you need the number 1 plate, a number 2 plate, then you have your paper, your die cut, and then a number 3 and a number 3. So it'd be number 1, number 2, put down a 3, put your paper, put the die cut, put another 3, run it through, because that number 2 is a shim. Now if it's too tight and it won't go through, you remove the shim. Simple as that. Then to do embossing folders, it says insert embossing folders, hinge first. And so you do a number 1, you do a number 3, you do your embossing folder with paper in it, and then you do another number 3. That's if it's just a regular embossing folder and it's thin. But if it's one of our embossing folders that are the 3D, then that's when you do the plate number 1, your embossing folder with your paper in it, and then your plate number 4. I have so many customers that say, I don't know, what order I put things in, or what kind of a sandwich I try and it won't go through. And I remind them all the time, look at your plate number 1, because it gives the instructions right here. They've put the label right on there to explain that. So I know, like, if you're an avid crafter, you know these things, but for beginners, they don't know these things, and so I wanted to remind them of that. Look at your plate number 1, and it will explain how to do that. So this would be the sandwich that I would make for my my 3D embossing. So there's that. But then, to get the most out of your actual embossing folder, you can run it through with just your cardstock. It can be any size that you want. If you want it to be a card front, then you would do a 4 by 5 and a quarter, unless you wanted the whole size of the front of your card. The front of a card is 4 and a quarter by 5 and a half, and so I have a sample here where I just put this piece of cardstock in my embossing folder, ran it through, and this is what I got. This is the peach pie on Night of Navy. This is that Mediterranean Blossom, and this is the back of one of those, and it's in the Night of Navy. And then this is also from that same one, and it's got peach pie, and I think it's got some pumpkin pie probably, and then it also has different yellows in there. So to bring the yellow out of the cardstock here, or the DSP, I put Daffodil Delight behind it and put some peach pie. And so that is a nice background for my card. And all I did was put the cardstock in here, run it through with plate 4-in-1, and that is my card that I made with that background. So it has some areas where it doesn't emboss as well, other ones where it's really a deep one because it's distressed. It does not do an all over embossing on it. There's places where it's not as deep of an embossing. So that's my one card. Okay, so then the other thing is, you could do where you ink up the inside of the embossing folder. So if I wanted it to be, so I have a couple samples here. So if I wanted the ink down in, so this is embossed up, but everything that's down, like the white areas, are raised up. The colored areas are pressed down. So to achieve that, you want to look at your embossing folder. So the inside parts here, so where it is colored, that is raised up on the front here. And so then these lines going around it, they are down inside. So anything on this front that is embossed on here and what's debossed on the actual folder will do the opposite on your cardstock. And so if you want where the inside is colored and the design is embossed white, it's white as an embossed, you put your ink on the side that the Stampin' Up! Logo is on. So this one, I would ink it all up, put this on, run it through with my 4 and my 1, and then when it comes out, that is what it looks like, and that is gorgeous. And I haven't made a card with this yet. I just wanted to explain the differences here. So there's that. But then if you wanted it to look more like this, where what's white here is colored and what's colored is white, that's what this one is. And how I did that was I cleaned this all off. Then I put ink, not on the one that has the Stampin' Up! On it, but I put the ink all over the other side because this is raised up, those little outlines and stuff. Those are raised up, and then the insides are pushed down. So I ink it up, I ink up the folder, put this down, still run it through. So now the white's showing and the ink's back here with my number 4 and my number 1. And when it comes out, this is what you get. So you can see the differences. This is more covered in color. This is just outlines of color. And there are certain areas where things are not as embossed because it's a distressed one. So this one gives a more distressed look, where this one here gives it a more unified look. So it just depends on what your preference is. So you don't have to use them just with the front. You can also do the back. So you can see the back of this. It's more of a smooth area, where over here it's more raised up. So there's that. So I'll put that there. Okay, then you can emboss with your embossing powders and your embossing folder. So it's a double embossing. And with that, instead of using an ink color, you would use your Versamark. And so, let's see. This one here is like this one. It is, I took my embossing folder and I put my Versamark, and this is a tacky ink, and I know it's dark, but it's a clear ink. I've had this one for years and years, and so it's had a lot of love, and but even though it's dark, it comes out a clear ink. But when you put it all over this folder, on the side that has Stampin' Up logo, so this one here, you're going to put it on this side, not on the front, but on the inside where that Stampin' Up logo is, and you put your embossing or your paper in there, run it through the embossing Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine between the 1 and the 4. This is what you get, where everything that's debossed has Versamark on it, and then I put powder on it when I took it out of my embossing folder, and this is the results that I got after I heat embossed it. And so I do have a card here, and because it is a pretty bold statement here, then I did my cardstock. I did another layer of cardstock, but I did some stamping to make it look like linen because it looked too plain if I just put regular cardstock there. And this is some of our new paper from, I think it's maybe the online, it might be in the catalog, the mini catalog. And then I put that layer of embossing, that, on a piece of cherry cobbler, and then I did my sentiment, put it on that garden green. So I just kept layering, and so that gives it a really pretty focal image instead of just being the background. Okay, so there's that. So put that there. And then we have a couple other things. So this one, how did I do this one? All right, so on this one, I guess, no, I did this, I think I did the same. So if I needed to do, to have another card in case I messed up, I think that's what I did with this one. So this one's the same as this one, but this one here, I did a little bit different. So I ran it through the embossing folder in the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine, just the cardstock. I didn't have any Versamark on it or anything. Then I took my Versamark ink and I just dabbed it on this cardstock so that it would get it in places. And then I put my powder on here. And we have these little things of powder. They're awesome. So I put my silver powder, and these are the Wow Fine embossing powders. Got a little bit of some stuff in there already. And then I put it on there, and it gives it a more distressed look. Because see, there's places where it's really heavy. There's places where it's really light. So it just depends on your preference on what type of an outcome you want from that. There are multiple ways that you can use your embossing folder. It's not just put your paper in there, run it through, and that's all you get. You can add inks, you can add your Versamark and embossing powders and different things like that. So I do have another thing here. And this one here is, instead of the front of the embossing folder, I turned it over. I put ink on the back panel of it, not on the one that had the Stampin' Up, but on the back of this, I put Versamark all over it, put my black cardstock in there, closed it, ran it through the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine with the 1 and the 4, and then when it came out, I put the gold embossing powder on there. And so this now has all this other embossing where it's in gold, and it gave it some more distressed look. And so I just layered it on to Mossy Meadow, and then this is Wild Wheat, because whenever you mix it with a green, it makes it look gold. This Wild Wheat look gold. I put some of our gold ribbon on it, and then used our essential dies, Stitch Essential dies, I believe they're called, with my sentiment, and that way the focal is the background. So there are numerous ways that you can use your embossing folder. You can play around with all sorts of different embossing folders. And so I hope that this is a technique that you will try and share with other people. And if you do give this a try, leave me a comment in the below the video. Don't forget to subscribe, share, give it a thumbs up, and I will catch you later. Happy Technique Tuesday. Happy stamping.